Good evening, everyone. I am Carolina Weather Group panelist Scotty Powell. Want to give you a quick update on some of the active weather that's going to be taking place over the next 24 to 36 hours. Currently, what you're looking at is a water vapor look, and what I'm going to be doing while this is happening, I'm going to make sure that I get this cross posted to our various platforms and outlets. So I'm running this solo tonight. So stick with me for about 30 seconds so I can get this cross posted to all of our platforms, and then we'll kind of get into what's going to be taking place here in the Carolinas. As you probably already heard from our video that we did last night, we're expecting to see some pretty nasty weather move through the Carolinas, not only North, but also South Carolina. The threats for flash flooding and severe thunderstorms are definitely the primary concern with what's going to be taking place in the area. So wanted to make sure that you all are aware of that. So I think I have everything up and going now. Let me make sure I've got that up and going. Oh, maybe not. All right. Again, I'm working solo tonight, so just bear with me for just a second, and we will get this show going for you all here in just a second. So I'm having some issues here. I'm sorry about this, y'all. Um, okay, so maybe I have it, maybe not. What you should be seeing, I don't see. Look over here. Okay, so I know you see my radar screen here. Bear with me for just one more moment here, and I will try to get what I want to get up and going here. All right. So you gotta love technology, especially when you have me running it. It's not the best. So there we go. There we go. So now you can see me. So again, welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. I'm Scotty Powell here, panelist with our weather podcast. And tonight we were originally going to be showing an interview that we did with Tom Nizzle about the 150th anniversary of the National Weather Service. But as you all know, we've got some nasty weather going to be moving through the area here in the Carolinas over the next 24 to 36 hours. So we want to get on tonight and tell you about that, and just kind of give you a heads up of what's going to be taking place over the area. So I think I've got all the bugs worked out. I do want to pull up the Facebook live feed just so if you do have any questions, you can direct them my way. So let me do that right quick. And again, it's a one-man show tonight, so bear with me for just a second. All right, I think we got it. So I've got the stream going up over here on my phone, so I can see your questions, and I think we're ready to go. So let's take a look at what to expect over the area. I do want to show you first some of the latest information that we have via our flash flood watches and things like that. So let's get that pulled up here, and you guys will show you what all we are looking at. So right now, a good chunk of North Carolina, this is including the mountains, the foothills, the Piedmont, over towards the Raleigh-Durham area, up into the Blacksburg area. We are all seeing a flash flood watch. And so this will be going through the day tomorrow into early Friday morning, where we could see the potential of flash flooding. We're going to talk about the difference between a watch and a warning in just a second. One thing of concern already, we've got a couple of flood advisories and flood warnings already taking place. This one is for the Catawba River that runs through the Gaston County area. This will be including the locations of Lowell and Cramerton, Renlo, Dallas, Mountain Island Lake area, already under a flood warning. And what's happening is Duke Energy is already releasing some of the water from Lake James, Lake Hickory, Lake Roadhus, and it's flowing downstream. And we've already seen some flooding in places downstream. We also have a flood warning down in the Columbia area. So again, for the potential, as we see this heavy rain move in, we already are seeing some flooding concerns. So the potential is there for the flooding. We also, for our coastal friends, have some gale warnings out. We also have some high surf advisories um, out for the coastal areas. So not only are we going to see heavy rain in the mountains and the foothills and the Piedmont, we're going to see that heavy rain in the eastern part of North Carolina, coastal South Carolina, just not to the point where a flash flood watch has been issued yet. But we are going to see some wind issues off of the coast and also some rough seas, high surf, and things like that. So a lot of things going on here in the Carolinas. So you know what? I better plug up my computer before it dies on me. So let me get the battery plugged in. Bear with me for just a second. You probably hear all kinds of scratching and stuff. All right, so we got the battery plugged in. So I didn't want the battery to run out as we're doing this. So again, all sorts of issues between flash flooding, wind, and we also have a severe weather element. So now we are going to be seeing the Storm Prediction Center. This is the latest update as of late afternoon for the area of the Carolinas. And we're going to have kind of a tiered system here. We've got an enhanced area of severe weather. This would be a level 3 out of 5. That's enhanced. That would be for a good portion of South Carolina. You're talking from the Greenville, Spartanburg metro area, including Columbia, all the way down to the coastal areas of South Carolina. That enhanced region also is into the Charlotte metropolitan area, south of the Greensboro area. So this enhanced region, definitely for the Midlands, upstate of South Carolina, and even portions of the Charlotte metro area. This yellow area is the slight area, and this would be a level 2. That includes the western Piedmont, the foothills, over towards the Raleigh-Durham area, Wilmington, the Outer Banks, down into the Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Hilton Head area, and just the very northwestern tip of South Carolina. Again, let's talk about those. I know there's some, I don't have that graphic pulled up yet, but we will find it. There are some issues with what does each of these means. And basically it's just the intensity for severe weather, the percentage, the coverage of severe weather. So again, if you live in the Midlands of South Carolina, I think that's the prime area that we're going to see the most severe weather. And the primary concern with these storms are going to be damaging winds, damaging straight line winds. Remember, guys, wind is wind. No matter if it's rotating or if it's blowing in a straight line, wind will create damage. It can cause injury to folks and even death if you're caught in the wrong circumstances. So wind is wind, no matter if it's a tornado or if it's 70, 80 mile per hour straight line winds. We saw back earlier in January, we had severe weather move through the South Carolina area, produced tornadoes, but also created some damage and wind gusts, straight line wind gusts that created some damage. Wind is wind, but right now the primary concern, if you live in the Augusta area, Columbia, up to the Charlotte area, that's where we think the prime area to see the damaging winds and even possibly a few tornadoes. If you live in this yellow area, the slight risk, it's more of a lower risk. I would say the marginal risk is kind of low. Slight is like low, medium. Orange, enhanced is like medium, and then we get up into the higher categories. So if you live in the slight area, this includes areas like, let's say, Greenville, South Carolina, Hickory, North Carolina, Greensboro, Raleigh, Durham, Wilmington, Cape Lookout, Cape Hatteras, Myrtle Beach, Charleston, Summerville, McClellanville, over towards Fayetteville, up into the Statesville area. You are in that slight risk where we're also concerned about damaging winds. The tornado threat is there, but it's just a tick lower. but we still have a tornado threat in that slight area. It even backs into the foothills. Now, if you're in the marginal threat, Asheville, Boone, normally mainly just the North Carolina mountains, there's still the damage and wind threat, but the tornado threat is pretty low in that area. So that is kind of a look of where the severe weather is going to take place. So we've talked about the flood watches, the severe weather. Now let's take a look at the look for excessive rainfall or flash flooding. I'm going to kind of zoom this in just a little bit more. I do see your questions. Looking through the questions, um, Wendy or Amy's talking about winds at school bus times. Yeah, that's something we'll talk about a little bit later, Amy. What's causing the front? Sheila's wanting to know that. We'll talk about that. I'll show you that on the water vapor in just a second. Edgefield and Aiken dismissing early, Justin. I don't know if that's a question or if you're actually telling me that. We'll get into the time frames. Teresa, Christine asking about straight line winds can seem like a tornado. Yes, they can, Christine. So here is the, Christine, here is the outlook for the potential of flash flooding. Now you're going to see a bunch of colors here, but let's kind of highlight this area, this moderate risk, which is a level 3 of 4 from the Weather Prediction Center talking about the flash flooding threat. This covers some pretty significant areas. The Asheville area, Greenville, Spartanburg area, the Hickory area, Charlotte, Greensboro, up into the Winston-Salem area. This also includes the Rock Hill area in South Carolina. It even is on the edge of the Raleigh-Durham area. So this moderate risk of flash flooding, I think when we kind of take a look back at this, the flash flood threat is the major concern from this, but we can't dismiss the severe weather threat. But the flash flood threat is there. So if you live in the Charlotte area, if you live in Hickory, along the Catawba Valley, the foothills, the Interstate 40 corridor, up into the Greensboro, Winston-Salem area, back towards Asheville, the upstate of South Carolina, Interstate 26, I-85, between Greenville and Charlotte, that area is going to be encompassed by heavy rainfall anywhere on the upwards of, let's look at this rainfall map. This is one that that I have come up with. Whoa, you don't want to see Tom Mizzle. There we go. This is kind of a rough estimate. I think anywhere along the Blue Ridge Mountains, between the Asheville area back towards Marion, up into the Boone area, Morganton, Lenoir, Wilkesboro, Taylorsville, Hickory, we could see anywhere between 4 to 6 inches of rain, just because this is a more favorable area to see increased rainfall rates. We have the Blue Ridge Mountains, the flow from this storm. Let's pull up the water vapor for a second. The flow is coming out of the Gulf of Mexico. As you can see, let's see, it was Sheila was asking, how is this, what is happening here? So let's expand this water vapor out, and I'll kind of show you, and then we'll show you why we're going to see this heavy rainfall. So we have this big old trough that's digging into the central part of the country. A lot of snowfall today in the Oklahoma and Dallas area on the backside of this low pressure as cold air moves in. But this moisture is stretching from the Carolinas back through Alabama, Mississippi, down into the Gulf of Mexico. And if you look at the origins of this rainfall, it takes it all the way to the Pacific. We kind of call this the Pineapple Express. You may have heard the phrase an atmospheric river. And that's what we have, is an atmospheric river, where this atmospheric river is kind of transporting this moisture from the Gulf, from the Pacific Ocean into the Gulf of Mexico, and then eventually up into the Carolinas. So that is why we are seeing this heavy rainfall in the area. So I hope that you can see that. For some reason, you may not be able to see it. I'm sorry. I was sharing the wrong screen there. I had to share this program. So let's kind of re-rack that as we pull up the visible satellite here. This is, and I'm looking at the stream here. Hopefully you can see that now. There we go. So here's what we are seeing. This is the atmospheric river. Here's the Carolinas. So this moisture stretches from the Carolinas down into the Gulf of Mexico, across Mexico, into the Pacific Ocean. I was to put this into motion, and it's going to take a little bit for all the frames to load here, but you can kind of see this trough, this low pressure over the central part has created all this warm, moist air to rush out ahead of this cold front, which is just now moving through the Memphis, Tennessee area. So we have this moisture that's connected from the Carolinas through the Gulf of Mexico, across the country of Mexico, into the Pacific Ocean. That's what we call an atmospheric river. It's just this, it's kind of a pathway, per se, an interstate that's transporting the moisture from one location to the other. So that is where we are seeing this rainfall and a lot of moisture to work with. This is normally something we would see in the springtime, summertime, or even the fall time as we kind of get into the tropical season. This is pretty abnormal for wintertime. Not that it's not happened, it just happens a lot less. And so we have this atmospheric river moving this moisture from the Pacific into the Carolinas. And so as we get into the Carolinas, I'm going to stop this for just a second. We all know the lovely Blue Ridge Mountains. So let's get back to this rainfall forecast. And so what happens when this moisture streams in from when the moisture streams in from uh, the um, the Gulf of Mexico, it likes to back up against the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that creates extra lift. Imagine like when you're washing your dishes and you have a wash rag and you kind of wash or wring out that wash rag. You want to get all that moisture out of it so your rag can dry. Well, that's what's happening in the atmosphere. The moisture is rising up against the mountains, and the mountains is creating that extra lift to kind of squeeze out all the available moisture that is in the atmosphere. And so along the Blue Ridge Mountains, the escarpment is what we call it, is where I believe, will see the highest rainfall totals. 4 to 6 inches, give or take a little bit on each side. So some places could see 3, some places could see 6 or 7, but a good swath of 4 to 6 inches of rain, I think, is possible in the foothills and the mountains of North Carolina. As we get into the Piedmont, just because we don't have that additional lift, we're still going to see the heavy rain as we get into the Piedmont, the upstate of South Carolina, into the Midlands. A good swath of 3 to 5 inches of rain is possible. Once you get into the Columbia area, towards the eastern part of the South Carolina into North Carolina, rainfall rates are going to be a little bit lower, but that's where the severe weather risk really starts to intensify. And as we get off the coast, so that is what the scenario looks like for rainfall precipitation amounts. Looking see your question about the timeline tree, so we're going to get to that in just a second. Claremont, North Carolina, how about is the tornado threat and winds? Let's go to that. Bear with me for just a second. I'm going to go on this website here. So let me get this up for you. And I've got so many programs running on my computer right now. It may be a little bit slower, but that's okay. We'll get it looked out because, Eric, I want to get to your question there. Here's the day 2 look, and let me get that on the screen for you all. Kind of show you the breakdowns of each threat. So this is the categorical. This is what we're looking at. We already talked about the enhanced, slight, marginal. Let's go into the tornado threat. So let me see if I can get this a little bit bigger. There we go. So hopefully you can see that now. You see a 5 and a 2%. So I want to kind of caution you with these numbers. If I would say there's a 5% chance of rainfall, you would just kind of blow me off and be like, what is 5%? But when we are looking at tornado wise, there is a 5% chance that we could see a tornado anywhere in this area within 25 miles. So a 5% chance, again, it's kind of low, but it's not zero. And just the way these storm systems move through, there is concern for a tornado. We'll show you the future cast in just a second. And I'll kind of show you those areas. The 2% chance, again, not a high threat, but there is that chance for a tornado. So that is the tornado threat. Let's let me get the screen back. Let's look at the winds, and this is the more telling sign of what's going to happen. This is the damaging wind threat. So there's a 30% chance that any storm that moves through this area within 25 miles of any point will produce damaging winds. Now, 30% chance, that's a huge increase. And we can actually see these numbers fluctuate a little bit as we get the updates in later on tonight and tomorrow. A 30% chance means that there's probably going to be at least a few severe thunderstorms that move through this area that we are going to get some wind damage reports out of. The 15% chance is highlighted with the slight risk. Again, that's for the foothills up into the Greensboro area, up into the Raleigh area. But this 30% chance is from locations near the Raleigh-Durham area, through the Charlotte area, down into Columbia, Augusta, even down into the coastal South Carolina, Georgia line. So that is the 30% chance, the enhanced region of seeing damage and winds. A good thing with this setup is there's not really a hail threat for this setup. So again, damage and winds is my primary concern, severe weather-wise. Tornado threat is there. So if I had to kind of break them down, obviously the first threat is going to be flash flooding. And that is the primary concern. The second concern, which is right under the flash flood threat, would be the damage and wind concern. And then the tornado threat is the third concern, but there's still an elevated concern there with the potential of seeing some tornadoes. So hopefully we're answering some of your answering some of your questions here. Just got a text message from Ricky, and let me get the link to them for this. They're gonna hop on too, so bear with me for just a second so I can get that to them. I didn't know if they were going to be able to jump on, so I came on a little bit early. I was scheduled to go at 9:00, but I got us a little bit early. So let me send that link to them, and hopefully they can jump in here. So, all right. So let me text them right quick, and that way I can bring them in. So. Sorry, you guys are really seeing the behind the scenes stuff. Okay, so you're really seeing the behind the scenes here. We're normally a little bit more organized than this, but hey, it's live and we're doing some severe weather coverage. Jared Smith looks like he is joining in, so I kind of snuck up on everybody and started before 9:00. So Jared, we were actually welcome. Glad you could join us. We were actually talking about your area where we were talking about the 30% chance, kind of an enhanced risk of damage and winds in the South Carolina area, just outside of the Charleston area.
Yeah, Scotty, and it's gonna be interesting to see how this develops, because it's all going to hinge on the instability. We hate these high shear low cape scenarios because it can be a whole lot of nothing, or they could be a whole lot of something, and it just could take a couple peaks of sunshine to just make all the difference. And so this 30% enhanced risk area, and we'll see if we can't punch that up. Actually, I think that would be good to see if I can grab that.
I got it, Jared. I'll share it and you can talk over it. How about that?
Yeah, sounds good. So we've got this. So the 30% risk is actually pretty well situated around and west of I-95. It coincides nicely with where the best wind energy and the best instability are going to develop. As the line gets closer to Charleston proper, we are going to be starting to ingest some more stable marine air. It's going to be a very straight southerly wind, and that, unlike in Georgia, where that comes off of the land, here in Charleston, the way South Carolina is arranged, it comes off the water, and so that's going to put a damper on the instability parameters a little bit, at least at the surface. Now, that being said, the dynamics, I mean, there's plenty of the wind fields are still rather potent, so I don't think that we get off scot-free from this. But certainly the better chance for the storms to really tap into that low-level jet and mix that down to the surface are going to be a little bit inland. So Scotty had the hail predictions up there.
Yeah,
I think,
Jared, for some reason the wind is the only one that's not wanting to populate right now. Tornado and hail, but
okay.
Oh, there's the wind. There we go. All right, we got it now.
There's the wind. Yeah. Okay. So there's your wind probabilities extending from the Gulf Coast all the way into the Charlotte metro now. That was added a little later this afternoon, around the noon update, and that makes sense. I mean, if you look at the orientation of the trough and again, I'll need a lot of graphics to back this up, but generally speaking, the configuration of the upper air, the configuration of the instability and everything is going to, Charleston's not going to get off scot-free, but I do think that areas along I-95, especially inland, especially near, especially places like, in just the Charleston metro area, like Moncks Corner, Somerville, maybe, St. George, all the way up and down I-95, and then to the west, certainly in the Midlands, certainly in the upstate, parts of the upstate there into the CSRA are certainly going to have they're certainly going to have a few rough and tumble hours tomorrow.
Definitely so. So to catch up, Ricky and Jared, what we've been talking about for those who may be joining, we've already kind of went through our concerns. The main concern is the flash flooding threat for portions of North and South Carolina. The damage and wind threat, which Jared was just going over, is our second concern. And our third concern is the tornado threat. So Jared, I know, again, that's kind of close to you. Ricky, feel free to jump in too. Again, kind of dependent on the instability and how much maybe clearing or maybe even sunshine that some areas see tomorrow before the line moves through.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be. I fortunately, the good news is I think that sunshine is going to be at least a little bit harder to come by. We've been seeing some decent signs of crapvection, as the storm chasers call it, showing up in the convection allowing models ahead of it. So some showers ahead of it. That'll help to put a damper on things, but again, with these QLCSs, you get a little split S, you get a little rear end flow jet gets a little happy and starts driving down, and that can induce some spin. And storm relative felicities ahead of it looks really good. The Cape does not, so it's really going to depend on just how unstable we can get. And but again, with wind fields like this, I think that we should be less concerned about the tornado side of things and just realize that, like, again, damaging straight line winds, that certainly is the greater concern. Tornadoes are scary. They get headlines. Maybe that helps raise awareness. I don't know. I certainly think there could be some warnings. We had some warnings earlier back in Mississippi. But I gotta say, I think if I'm looking at this one, I'm definitely looking more at the straight line wind threat for sure.
You were talking, Jared, wind is wind, no matter if it's rotating or blowing in a straight line. 60, 70, 80 mile per hour wind gusts definitely going to cause some damage. Ricky, you live in the Bristol area, kind of near the mountains, where we're expecting to see more of a heavy rain threat. Also, the concern for landslides with as much moisture, as many heavy rain events we've had over the past month or so.
Yeah, just the amount of rain, and I think the rate of which it may come down at certain times tomorrow morning is going to be a concern, because some of these rainfall rates can be rather impressive, and especially when you add the upslope. And don't forget, we've had the rain today, so that creates a double caveat. So first off, we get the rain in addition to what we saw today, and so consider it like a sponge. Basically, you're pouring more water on the sponge, and it can't soak it up anymore. So as a result, you get pretty significant runoff. And when we get landslides that occur in mudslides, basically what's happening is that water is flowing over ground that's already saturated. It's loosening the soil more and more. And then that landmass just kind of slides off and is in the form of a landslide as a result. And so I think that's going to be a concern, Scotty. The other thing that I wanted to point out in reference to the severe weather threat is we've also weakened the root system of a lot of the trees across the area by getting all this rainfall today. So that could be a concern in addition to the potential for the landslides and just additional flooding.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, I saw a graphic earlier today. I think anywhere in the Carolinas, especially upstate South Carolina, western North Carolina, we've already seen 5 to 7, 8 inches of rain in just the 5-6 weeks that we've had into 2020. And then you're looking at maybe adding on 6 additional inches of rain to that. So saturated soil, a little bit of wind is going to cause some down trees to come. I would pretty much guarantee that we'll see down trees outside of thunderstorms, just because a gust of wind could definitely do that. Another concern, Ricky, we're talking about, there's already a couple of flood warnings issued, one near the Gastonia area in Gaston County, one in Buncombe County, one near the Columbia area. just from the recent rainfall. I know Duke Energy has released a lot of water from like Lake James, Lake Roadhiss, Lake Hickory, and it's all moving downstream. So we're already seeing flooding, river flooding. And this is something I was wanting to talk about. So maybe we can all have an interaction here. There's kind of a difference between a flood is a flood, but there's a difference between flash flooding and what we call just flooding. You may see a flood warning and you may see a flash flood warning. And Jared, if I'm not mistaken, I think we were talking internally, that may come across different on your cell phones tomorrow if you get caught in one of these, because now there's classifications to these flood warnings and flash flood warnings that your phone may not go off if it's not as impactful as other warnings. So
from my understanding, that actually got delayed. I don't know if you guys saw this announcement today, but I got an email from the Weather Service in Blacksburg that was delayed. So guess good little good news, bad news, I guess. More people get alerts tomorrow, but what Scotty was referencing is, that there is a plan in the future to basically not send out flash flood warnings to your phone unless they are a level 2 or a level 3 flood alert, just to kind of minimize some of the lesser flood warnings. Certainly you still want to take all flash flood warnings seriously, but some of them just don't cover as widespread of an area. So they're trying to limit the amount of alerting that goes to people's cell phones to cut down on the perceived flash flood alarm ratio and stuff like that. Scotty, you mentioned the rivers real quick. I glanced at the river gauges for eastern, kind of the western portion of North Carolina, I should say. And a lot of them near Asheville expected to reach that minor flood stage or get to almost moderate flood stage in a couple of instances. You get down towards the French Broad, getting into areas in Henderson and Transylvania County, and that's expected to crest just below moderate flood stage late Friday. So a lot of these rivers, are going to be going up tomorrow, but the crest may not come until Friday in a lot of instances, just because water's got to flow into them from a lot of the creeks and streams and places like that. Some of the places we don't have forecasts for, but we do have gauges at, are in the North Carolina high country. You get into Ashe, Watauga, and Avery counties. And anyone who's lived in portions of Watauga County knows the Watauga River near Sugar Grove, that's notorious for having some flooding issues. And near Boone Mall, we see some flooding issues pretty often. So don't be surprised tomorrow if you hear some reports of flooding Watauga County, Avery, Ashe, Watauga, Madison, Mitchell counties. It just seems like those are some of the areas where that water hits the mountains and it squeezes every little bit of moisture it can out of it and rains it down on those poor towns.
Definitely. So looking at some of our comments here, Allie is asking, can you go over the concerns for the Mooresville area if there are any? We are new to the area and this is our first weather event. So Mooresville area, Iredell County, let me pop up the let me see if I can find the severe weather outlook. We'll cover that right quick and then we'll talk about the possibility. I think Mooresville, the main concern there is going to be the flooding, but there is a kind of a severe weather threat. So let's pop up the, this is the SPC severe weather outlook. Again, the orange area is the enhanced area. This is kind of like a level 3. The yellow area is a slight area, level 2. So the Mooresville area is here in Iredell County. It's kind of on that barrier between the enhanced and the slight. The primary concern in Iredell County and anywhere kind of the Charlotte metro area, I believe, will be flash flooding first. But second would be that damage and wind threat. As Jared said, the tornado threat is small, is there, but it's not as blaring or not as concerning as the damage and wind threat and the flash flood threat for the Mooresville area there in Iredell County. So hopefully that will answer your question. Guys, for y'all hopped on, there was a few people asking about school closures, and I know that's something that none of us control, but I think there was some school closures in Alabama and Georgia today, maybe even in Tennessee. Ricky, I think you guys have actually had some schools already cancel classes for tomorrow for the flooding concerns.
Yeah, we had a few for flooding. We actually have a ton right now due to the flu that are closed. They're taking the rest of the week off to clean the schools. That happens a lot. Happens more and more when we seem to not get a lot of snow during the year. They seem to close more just so they can use those snow days up too. But hey, regardless, a lot of people are sick and they've had a lot of problems with people calling out sick and not being able to find substitutes. But yeah, we got a few schools in my area closed due to the threat of flooding. From my area, East Tennessee, Hawkins County, Greene County, This is the almost coming up on 1 year anniversary. It was February 7th of last year where we had a pretty bad flash flood event in Hawkins County and Greene County in the early morning hours. So I was talking tonight during our weathercast. It's odd to see February is trending like this. And I don't know off the top of my head what the data shows for Western North Carolina. You may know it better, Scotty, but we had 20 out of 28 days last year with at least a trace of rain in the Tri-Cities. Year before that, 2018, was also rainy. 21 out of 28 days had at least a trace of rain. So we were 7 inches above average for the Tri-Cities last year. And I know certainly Western North Carolina likely trending above average in terms of the rainfall. And February, looking at the models, looks like we're going to continue this wet pattern.
It does. This some people asked me today in an interview, is this normal for this time of the period? And I said, kind of not really, but the past couple of years, yes. Like you were talking about, Ricky, the last couple of years, it has been pretty wet. And the last 2 years here outside of the mountains were snowless Februarys for North Carolina, which is normally the month that you can about bet on at least a little bit of snowfall falling in North Carolina. So pretty warm and wet across the area. Jared, I was also wanting to toss to you because I know we're talking about the flash flood threat, the severe weather threat, but there's also some coastal impacts along the Carolina coast with high surf advisories and gale warnings, I believe, off the coast. So you want to kind of go over those coastal impacts for those who may be watching along the North and South Carolina coast?
Yeah, absolutely, Scotty. And so we've got, gale warnings, and let me just grab a map here. It's just, what, at the end of the day, you just got to grab a map. Let me take myself permanently off of temporary mute function. But yeah, gale warnings, small craft advisories up and down the coast for sure. Let's start with we'll start with Wilmington. We'll work our way around, and let's see. Yeah, gale warnings pretty much up and down the coast. We have high surf advisories out towards the Outer Banks. We have, I don't know, Charleston does not have any high surf advisories out. I don't think that I think they do that on a seasonal basis. So, and I think the surf zone stuff is out of season right now, which is odd because it seems like every day is a beach day these days. But gale warnings for all the Atlantic waters, small craft advisories up in the Georgia waters. And then let's see, we have gale watches for Charleston Harbor and from Edisto to Savannah. So suffice to say, it's going to be windy. We may even see some land-based wind advisories come out, primarily in South Carolina, and maybe getting further up into North Carolina near the coastal areas. We could see gusts up to 40 miles an hour just by virtue of having all of that wind energy around. So again, I guess the one thing that is, somewhat of a relief, but before I say that, let me make sure that, let me see. We have not heard much about the coastal flood threat, and that is helpful. We're going to get to about 6.2 feet tomorrow morning in Charleston Harbor, but it does not look like, even despite the onshore wind, that we're going to have any coastal flooding issues here, which is good. In fact, we're going to kind of, along the coast, we're going to kind of miss out on the flooding rains. That's where the atmospheric river is setting up, so to speak, basically, right in that corridor where we have all the flash flood watches and warnings. And unfortunately, the coast is going to miss out on that, which is kind of a relief for us, but also, we're certainly not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just going to take a quick look at some of the other gauges here, see if I can't get these to load. Might have just anyway, I think I just made my computer mad. So so Scotty, ultimately, like, it's going to be, it's going to be a lousy weather day tomorrow. I think, if we had to call it what it is, it's going to be kind of lousy tomorrow. No matter where you are, it's not going to be a great day at the beach. Although I just looked at the Folly surf cam and it is snowing. I'm just kidding. So
oh yes,
always
the old Folly Gate. Looking at I'm just looking at some of the reports coming out, and I think Ricky had to step away for a second, but he'll be back. Maury County, Tennessee, emergency manager reports flash flood. Water rescue was conducted at King Hollow, Mount Joy roads. Numerous flooded roadways were reported across the county. So just kind of looking at some of these reports coming out of the Weather Service offices in Tennessee, talking about the flooding. Something that I want to bring up, and Jared, something you have a lot of experience with, just because you guys have went through a lot of flooding lately, is I want to share this right here. This is understanding the Weather Prediction Center excessive rainfall risk category. So we kind of showed this a little bit earlier. Marginal, slight, moderate, high. It's a little bit more condensed than the severe weather threat. But for that area that you were talking about, Jared, the atmospheric rivers area, the kind of where the watches are, there's a moderate risk. And Jared, these are included in some pretty big places. The Greenville, South Carolina metro, the Asheville area, Asheville metro, Charlotte metro, the Greensboro, Winston-Salem metro area. So some of the more populated areas in South and North Carolina that could see this. And this is numerous flash flooding events with significant events possible. Many streams may flood, potentially affecting larger rivers. So you guys, obviously a lot of experience along the coast over the last couple of years with these flood events, but moderate outside of tropical events are pretty rare, aren't they?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we're finding that if all you need is the right setup, right? And we can have, and we've got one right here. We've got a negatively tilted trough. You've got some upslope going on, and you got a really good fetch of moisture from the Gulf. And so that's all you need. You don't necessarily need a tropical system in order for this kind of excessive rainfall to take place. Do we see them in tropical systems a lot? Yeah, absolutely. No question about it. It's almost a gimme. Unless it's moving rather quickly, which is rare, but seems to be very rare these days at this latitude. But yeah, we, I mean, again, with the 2015 flood, for example, that's kind of the benchmark around here now and into Columbia. We have kind of a similar setup where you have just this plume of moisture that sets up and just funnels into the area. And so it looks like we're going to see something similar, at least for a while tomorrow. And I guess the thing that's going to save us at the coast is going to be the fact that this line is going to accelerate off the coast about midnight through 2 a.m. And take that moisture transport with it as that trough lifts north. So again, this moderate risk here. I mean, if you're in this moderate risk area, you need to be paying attention, and you need to think about, it's like, what does flood? Am I at risk of this? Do I need to travel? That's a good question to ask yourself tomorrow. If you don't have to go anywhere, maybe don't. How will I get warned? Again, cell phone will go off if flash flooding becomes an issue, but you can also have just regular flood advisories, for urban small stream flooding. But that can still be impactful. There's a reason why they put an advisory out for that. So just want people to, be very cautious, and above all, turn around, don't drown, please. You cross a flooded road, you don't know how deep that water is. And in many cases, you may not know if that road is still there. So you can often get washouts if you're not careful. So just a couple things to keep in mind as we go through into tomorrow.
Definitely. So we had a few more questions about the timing. So I wanted to get this up. This is kind of the NAM. I don't think it's the updated.
The updated one is running right now.
Yeah, so this is the 18Z run, but this will kind of give you an idea. I don't think there'll be much change from it. As you can see, this is 2 a.m. Thursday morning, so just a few hours from now. You're going to see a lot of rain spread over the western part of North Carolina, even the upstate part of South Carolina. That's why we have that moderate risk. That's where we're going to see the longest amount of time with heavy rainfall. As we get into the morning hours, this is around 10, 11 o'clock. You can kind of see the waves of rain, but this is 2 p.m. As you can kind of see, there's a line of rain or a line of storm starting to develop down in southern Georgia, upstate South Carolina, and you can kind of see them trying to get organized here in western North Carolina. as we go to 2 p.m., well, skipped 3 p.m. So as you get to 4 p.m., you can kind of see that line now organized into the Charlotte area. Line of severe thunderstorms moving through Charlotte, North Carolina. That's going to be chaotic commute home. So be prepared for that. That line just now getting into the Columbia area. This is by 6 p.m. That line has moved off to the east of Charlotte, but still kind of lagging back over the Columbia area. And Jared, I guess this is where we should say, this is not, you can't take this as gospel, but anytime that we kind of see these little notches in the line, that's where you may see an isolated tornado threat. But this is where we would probably see the damage and wind gusts between 3 to 7 p.m. in the Columbia area, a little bit earlier than that in the Charlotte area. Here's the line of storms approaching your area, Jared, in Charleston. This is 8 p.m. Extends from the Raleigh area down through the PD region of South Carolina into the Charleston area. And then I guess that's about 10 p.m. as it enters the coastal areas of South Carolina and then eventually off the coast. So that's kind of a breakdown. If you live in the mountains, upstate South Carolina, western North Carolina, your time would be between 12 and 4 p.m. The Charlotte area, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Columbia, let's say between 3 and 7 p.m. And then as you get into the Raleigh area down through the PD region, we'll say 4 to 7, and then the coastal areas between 8 to 10, 11 p.m. That's kind of a rough estimate. We'll have to see. We'll kind of get that tightened up overnight.
Yeah, and I think something to keep in mind. A lot of you may not know it, but a lot of y'all watching out there, if you use the Weather Channel app or something like that, and you use the future radar mode, that's essentially a weather model. That's a simulated reflectivity from a weather model. And one thing that the models don't do a great job of is timing these squall lines. We'll often see them run well ahead of the model projections. And so I'll caution you, if you're using these kinds of products to try and figure out when it will be there, it may not be totally on the money there. We see it in the models that we use to create forecasts. We see it in the consumer apps. We see it all over the place. So that is something to keep in mind. Scott, if you want to bring that back up again, I wanted to point something out that I noticed. Just if you want to take that back to about 1 o'clock, noon or 1 o'clock on that 3 kilometer NAM run. And it looks like there's a 0Z now, so that's good.
Yep.
All right.
There's 1 p.m.
Yeah. So let's take it forward to 2 o'clock, because I wanted to, point something out. We start getting in the Midlands before this line really starts to organize. You can see some of these individual cells, and when the model is showing that little kidney bean shape on it, I mean, that's very much indicative of the kind of wind shear that we're going to be dealing with. We could be dealing with some, if the instability can develop, there could be a few supercells out ahead of the line, and if that happens, that wind damage and tornado threat could jump up a little bit. So certainly something to watch there, well ahead of that line, as before it organizes a little bit more.
Excuse me. Yeah, this is 4 p.m. So I think this is actually a little bit slower than what I just showed you with the 18Z. So as Jared said, you got to give about 2-3 hours either side with these models. Again, that could be a pretty nasty line as it moves, especially into the Charlotte, Columbia area towards the coastal areas. So,
yeah. I will also say that the NAM is very bullish on instability. So, again, I've been sampling kind of as we've been talking. I've been sampling some of the soundings, the model soundings, and they are much more bullish on instability than they were. So. We'll see if that's a trend. We'll see if that's real. Cloud cover busts the whole thing. So, busts a lot of it. So, but the potential is there, and
definitely
the atmosphere is capable.
There's one other aspect to this weather system that I kind of hesitate to bring up, but we'll bring on Ricky for this. As this system moves out, not only do we have a flood threat, no damaging wind threat, possible tornado threat, there's also going to be a snow threat, especially for the mountainous areas, Ricky.
Yeah, the cold air going to come in behind. I don't know if you can pull up the one of our models to show as I talk about this, Scotty. But we'll watch that cold air come in on Friday, and it's going to be a dramatic shock to the system. We're going to go from temperatures in the 60s and 50s, and even in some cases the 70s that we saw over the past couple of days, down into the 40s and 30s as we go into Friday, especially in the higher terrain. In fact, in parts of the North Carolina high country, we could be dealing with temperatures in the 20s and some wind chill values are even colder on Friday. Then another batch of moisture starts working its way in for Saturday. You can see that colder air coming in there on the model as we go later out into time into Friday afternoon. The moisture and the cold air starting to come in across Kentucky, and that moves into the North Carolina high country and the mountains of Tennessee as we go into the early morning hours of Friday. So this is around Friday, around 5 a.m., 6, 7, 8 a.m. I'm dealing with some scattered snow showers, so likely going to see some snow falling parts of Ashe, Watauga, Avery counties, areas near the I-26 Sam's Gap area, Unicoi, getting into North Carolina, and then right along the state line, the Smoky Mountains, Tennessee and North Carolina will have some of those snow showers ongoing. And some of those will probably break the mountains and move over into areas like Blowing Rock and areas as you get into Beach Mountain, places like that. I think the heavier stuff's going to stay kind of on the Tennessee side, but yeah, definitely going to be quite the shock to the system as we go into Sunday, just how cold we're going to be and how dramatic of a change. But that kind of shows you when we get these huge temperature swings from warm tomorrow to cold on Friday, how dynamic and strong of a front we have moving through that's able to bring all this heavy rain.
And Ricky, I was noticing on the models, and this is no fluke because I've seen this a couple of times now. We could actually see some snow showers even in northern Georgia, northern Alabama, if everything sets up right. So
yeah, some pretty deep cold air coming in with this thing.
Yeah, so there's another side of that. So all kinds of sides to look at this storm. I know we've been on the air for a while now, so looking to see if you guys have any other questions. Again, the flood threat, the primary concern for Western North Carolina, upstate South Carolina. The severe threat, I would say, Jared, would be the primary concern for the Midlands of South Carolina. I mean, they're going to see heavy rain, but it looks like the severe threat may kind of outweigh the flood threat there. And then as you get closer to you guys at the coastline, you'll have to watch that line of storms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, continuing to sample around some of these things, I think the severe probabilities are pretty well in place. I think that we don't escape any damaging winds. I don't think that we, I think that we're going to see, a fair bit of damaging wind reports tomorrow. Just the wind fields are just really, I very anomalously strong for this time of year. And so certainly there's a lot to consider. So, folks, tomorrow, I think, maybe in the morning, make sure you bring in the loose stuff from outside, because, if you do get a strong storm, that stuff, it could fly a little bit. We don't know how far, of course, but I think it would be, it's prudent to just make sure that you've got all that stuff put away. I know some people decorate for Valentine's Day. It's a thing. You don't spread the love that way. So, to bring everything in, and then, make sure that you have warnings, especially along the coast. One thing that's going to be important is that these storms are going to come at night. So if you're in the coastal areas, I strongly recommend that you can make sure that you have multiple ways to get warnings that can wake you. If a tornado warning goes off, good news is that your phone is going to go off. So one thing that you should do is leave it off of silent. I know that that's kind of verboten and you don't want to offend anybody, but this is a good time to leave it off of silent and out of your do not disturb mode for at least a few hours. After midnight or so, you can turn that on and get a good night's sleep. But leading up to that, you're going to want to have that available, because just in case, hopefully you're not going to, the odds say that you're not going to need it, but if you do need it, you're going to be glad you had it.
Definitely so. And we say it till we're blue in the face. Turn around, don't drown. Coming across any flooded roadways. There's barricades up for a reason. I promise you, emergency management, police, fire officials, they've already checked out the area and deemed it unsafe. So you may have to. In the
words of one of our former state governors, Scotty, don't put on your stupid hat.
That's right. Don't put your stupid hat on. Just find a different way. I'm sure there's another way to get to where you need to be. So don't drive through flooded roadways, but take it serious. just because you may have a bigger truck or vehicle like that, water is can do a lot of damage, and it doesn't take a lot of it to cause some concerns. And we just want to keep you safe out there. So don't travel through flooded roadways. Like Jared said, I'm sure at some point there'll probably be some severe thunderstorm warnings, maybe even tornado warnings issued. So heed those warnings, know where to go, and don't panic. Just be prepared. That's the thing. I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh, they're scared or they're panicked." No need to be panicked. Just have a plan. Know what to do if these things pop up, and we've seen much worse than this. So we'll get through this. But again, guys, any closing comments before we kind of wrap this up? All right, so I've got the head shake. So again, if you were planning to tune in and see Tom Nizzle's 150th anniversary National Weather Service show, we apologize for breaking into that tonight. We are going to air that on Sunday evening. So be looking for that if you're looking forward to Tom's interview. We're going to be airing that on Sunday evening. And then next week, you'll be tuned into our interview that we did with the Impacts Project with the I'm sure they're probably going to be busy this weekend with this storm that's going on. So they'll probably get some good sampling of the data.
Yeah, I saw Jeff Frame was releasing weather balloons in the Midwest in support of that. There's been some messages coming across. I get all the administrative notices emailed to me. So because, I like to know what's going on. And one of the administrative notices that I got last night was that there were going to be special balloon releases. So you'll hear all about this on the Impact Show, but it's a really cool project. I hope y'all tune in for that.
It is. It's going to be a great show. And so we'll air that next Wednesday night, barring any other crazy weather. So thanks for tuning in tonight. Be watching our social media streams. Follow Jared at CHSWX on Twitter. You can follow Ricky Matthews on Twitter. Is it WCYB Ricky or is it Ricky WCYB? I can't remember, Ricky. Which one is it?
WCYB_Ricky.
There you go. So follow Ricky on Twitter. Follow Carolina Weather Group. We will be tweeting out social media pictures. If you get any and you're safely able to get any pictures, send them our way. That way we can distribute them out and help alert those people who may be affected in that area. So just have a plan tomorrow. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time here on the Carolina Weather Group. All right, hold on one second, guys. We should be off.